There is a bombshell new report out exposing the scope of Donald Trump's destruction and eventual shuttering of the Kennedy Center after more than half a century as a beacon known the world over of the performing arts. It took Trump less than a year, during which he appointed himself chairman, slapped his name on the building right above former President John F. Kennedy's, and then closed it for what he called a, quote, complete rebuilding. But Joseph Palermo, who was hired last year as the Kennedy Center's first visual arts curator, says that what's happened behind the scenes is far worse than that, than what's been public-facing. Palermo writes this in The Atlantic, quote, "We suspected it wasn't just because of problems with the physical structure, but also because a year of tumult had left the organization barely able to function artistically and financially. Trump had come in promising that for the Kennedy Center, the best is yet to come. Quote, on the inside, my colleagues and I saw instead cronyism, incompetence, and a series of bizarre moves that would lead to the Kennedy Center going dark. In between, we had seen artist cancellations, shrinking audiences, firings of old staffers, and influxes of new ones, a lot of drama, not just on stage. In one example, Palermo writes, quote, the institution's spending priorities seemed dubious. The roof had been leaking for years, and the willow trees in the River Plaza outside the Grand Foyer were visibly rotting. And yet the high-priority renovations made to the building involved adding gold gilding to the chandelier of the presidential box in the Opera House. MS Now has reached out to the Kennedy Center with a detailed list of questions. They did not get back to us. I want to bring in the author of that piece we just read from, former visual arts curator at the Kennedy Center, Joseph Palermo. Amanda and Angelo are still with us. Joseph, tell us what happened.
Oh, where to begin, Ms. Wallace? Thank you for having me. So I started in June of last summer. I was hired under Rick Grenell to establish a visual arts program for the Kennedy Center. I was told that he wanted to expand the mandate of the National Cultural Center to include a focus on the visual arts and to give people who come to the Kennedy Center something to see and experience when there isn't a showtime happening at the time that they're there. But it was very shortly after I arrived that I started to notice that things were maybe not quite what I was expecting. I think the first red flag that I noted was around the time of the Les Miserables previews that were occurring last summer. There was one evening where tickets to sit near President Trump in the presidential box and attend a VIP reception with him went for $2 million. That same evening, in that same performance, orchestra-level seats were being sold for $100,000. And other things occurred shortly thereafter that started to make me realize they were using the proximity to President Trump as the self-appointed chairman of the Board of Trustees to sell that access to him under the guise of fundraising. And other things that they were doing entailed selling off the lounges, affixing corporate names and individual donor names to them, which historically had not happened in the 50-plus years that the Kennedy Center has been opened under various succession of leaders. Those lounges were gifted to the United States and the American people by way of the Kennedy Center as a reflection of cultural diplomacy and that legacy that President Kennedy had to cultural diplomacy.
Why did you say yes to working for Rick Grenell and the Trump administration?
I thought this was going to be, I'm an artist here in D.C. I've been an artist in D.C. for quite some time, and it's a dream, to work at the Kennedy Center and to be asked to build something at the Kennedy Center, especially at a time like this. And, many people that are in my life that I know and love have chosen to boycott the institution, and, they're fleeing it, and I certainly don't begrudge them that personal choice. But for me, I feel like now more than ever is the time that people should step up to buttress these institutions. And, I wanted to try to contribute something and try to help and save the Kennedy Center in some small way by being there. And by coming forward the way that I have been this week, it's still my attempt to try to save the Kennedy Center.
How can the Kennedy Center be saved from the damage they've done to it?
I think, and this is another reason why I'm coming forward, I think that a solution here could be that Congress enacts some sort of firewall to prevent the politicization of the Kennedy Center, our national cultural center, from anyone who comes in, whether that's Trump or another party after him. I think that, this 250th anniversary of America's founding should be the time and opportunity that we use to reaffirm our commitment to free speech and the freedom of creative expression, to have it free from any sort of political interference.
Yosef, do you know where the $2 million went that people had to pay to sit near Donald Trump?
I don't, and there was speculation among the staff that there may have been kickbacks to Trump for participating in that.
What is your sense of the role that culture is playing right now in leading the country away from Donald Trump? Bruce Springsteen and all the artists that boycotted performances at the Kennedy Center after Trump slapped his name on it and politicized it.
I as an artist myself, I do feel like I have to represent free speech, through my being. And I think that a lot of artists feel that same way. And so I think our role in culture and creating culture and driving conversations through culture, we have to take up that mantle, and now more than ever, especially.
I want to bring you in on this, Angelo. I mean, this is, in terms of giving the MAGA movement credit for what it got right, nodding toward culture and creating an incentive structure for culture to align with MAGA has benefited them. Culture seems to also be the first to flee, maybe last on, first off, right? What is your sense of how dramatically that has reversed?
I think of it as a lot like, especially in the stages around like the Kennedy Center and some of these other things, as speed bumps, right? I'm not sure they've done the full reversal, but what they've done is slow it down. And that's really the most important part, especially that first year or so of so many of the things that Trump had done. As you noted, it was a bit of an intentional strategy, the theory being that politics was downstream from culture. And so they needed to focus as much of their efforts on shaping and driving culture or changing it or breaking the parts of it that were oppositional, so that then they could have all the downstream effects, including that political control. And that's the way that I look at it, that the sort of the pushback there is not creating these massive reversals, but what it's doing is slowing it down so that there's space and for other things to play out. And I think that's actually a really big deal, because if you look across the different sectors, every sector caved. The law firms, they caved. The education institutions, they caved, right? It didn't matter. The advertising agencies, they caved. Anytime, they went after every major sector, and they all caved immediately or folded. Most of them did. So all the bulwarks were breaking. So it is actually a really big deal that the individual artists recognized that there was something really significant at play here. And so that's the way I take it. It is a big deal, and it does sort of create that space for breathing room, and then that's how you start to then, as you know, reverse it. But first, you got to slow it down. You have to arrest it.